started, I'd like to explain some of the rules that we will operate under. We have a good sound system here that allows us to speak on an individual basis, but if too many people try to speak at the same time, we will not be able to hear the person and you will get feedback into the audio system. So I'm the moderator. My name is Julius E. I'm the director of the Ralph J. Bunche International Affairs Center. I will call on you, and when I call on you, you take and push the mic button, and then that will let you come on. And then when you finish talking, cut the mic button off, and that will take you off and allow someone else to talk. Okay? Do we understand that? All right. Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the Ralph J. Bunche International Affairs Center at Howard University. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the President of the University, H. Patrick Swaggart, to one event that I think that we are very pleased with at Howard University. Dr. Swaggart has often spoke of Howard University in the service of the nation. He spoke of us as an excellent academic center, an institution, a research institution, and an institution in the service of the nation and the world. This activity today, I think, falls within that category because we're going to explore a subject that I think is very interesting and very dear to the people in the Afro-American community. That is the issue of slavery in Mauritania and Sudan. This is an issue that gets into the whole question of human rights. The past week here at Howard University, we held a symposium on the status of Afro-Latinos, dealing with people of African ancestry in Latin America and the human rights problems that they were enduring in their countries. Today we're switching to Africa, to Sudan and Mauritania. On this subject, there are many different views. Howard University does not take a position on any view that is expressed here today. But since we're an academic institution, we feel that all views should be presented to our students and discussed among faculty in the academy in terms of intellectual exploration, and today we want to explore this subject from the vantage point of view of the speakers that we have here today. I'm pleased to thank the Independent Women's Forum, that has worked very carefully to help us to put this event on. Barbara Ledeen is here today. I would like for her to stand up and say thank you very much for all the help that you have given us. Thank you. Each speaker will speak for approximately 7 minutes, and at the end of all of the speakers, we will have a question and answer session that we hope will be open and free and quite to the point. So with that, I would like to call on our first speaker, Dr. Charles Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs is the research director of the American Anti-Slavery Group and is working to bring attention to the continuing practice of chattel slavery in East Africa. Dr. Jacobs and the Independent Women's Forum hope that this will be the beginning of an international abolitionist campaign that will start in the Washington area on March the 23rd. Dr. Jacobs, please.
Thank you. I need the projector. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come here. We came here to tell you today that though Black History Month is over, Black slavery is not. Today, as we gather in this historic place, press this again? Okay. We came here to tell you today that although Black History Month is over, Black slavery is not. As we gather in this historic place founded by freed slaves, Black men, women, and children are captured and enslaved. They are bought and sold, some for as little as $15. They are tortured. They are inherited. They are given as wedding gifts. And as the photo in our newsletter shows, they are branded. In addition, her name, by the way, is Alanga Jack. She was taken in a slave raid in Sudan when she was 6 years old. She was branded by her master's wife, so, quote unquote, you won't get lost. In addition, these black slaves are bred. The children of raped slaves belong to the master. So today we come to give you documents and photos and eyewitness reports about slavery in Mauritania and Sudan, and to ask for your help. And I am certainly one who hopes that after today's presentation, Howard University will take a position on this, that slavery does exist and it needs to be addressed. I'll leave the eyewitness reports to the people here who have seen slavery. I just want to first open with an outline, a broad outline of the basic facts. Facts that you did not know, most probably. The countries that stretch across the northern continent, the northern part of the African continent, straddle an Arab-African divide. In the past, there was an active slave trade, less well known here, but a trade that at least equaled the Western slave trade that is known. Today's news is that in Mauritania, slavery simply never ended, and in Sudan it has returned. You may not know that news. It has been suppressed, and it has been covered up. I would like you to take a look at one more slide. This little girl must be 10 or 11 years old. She is serving her Arabo-Berber masters in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. She was perhaps inherited or given as a gift. Her children will be there. She will serve them in every way possible. In 1994, the State Department published reports that there were up to 90,000 slaves serving their Arabo-Berber masters in Mauritania. These are chattel. They are wholly owned property of others. They are used for farming, for domestic work, and they're concubines. Hundreds of years ago, every black in Mauritania converted to Islam, and that means that the slaves in Mauritania today are black Muslim slaves. These black Muslim slaves of Mauritania are not allowed to enjoy the basic rights of Muslims, or their co-religionists, in even the poorest of Muslim countries. They may not marry without the master's permission. They may not pray or go to mosque without consent. It is difficult to talk of other people's humiliations, but we have made it a decision to speak of these things in public. A 1990 report by Human Rights Watch Africa describes various tortures that may befall Mauritanian slaves who displease their masters. For a normal kind of upset of displeasing of the master, a slave may be tied up and thrown into the sun for a period of time, up to a day or two, without food and water. However, if a slave truly upsets his master, if he is very recalcitrant, in the American context I think we would have called this uppity, he may undergo a series of tortures that have been described as such. There is the camel treatment, in which a camel is deprived of water for several days. He has a shrunken stomach. The offending slave is tied to the underbelly of the camel. The camel is then taken to water, and the rapidly expanding stomach tears the slave apart. The insect treatment is when the master puts small desert insects into the ear canals of the slave, caps them with stones. The head is bound, the hands and feet are tied, and the person is driven mad. Continuing with the sketch only. Sudan is Africa's largest country. There is an Islamic fundamentalist holy war in that country. The Arab Muslim North has attacked the black mostly animist and Christian South, also Muslims in the South. As a result of that war, Arab militias armed by the government of Khartoum raid African villages. They shoot the men. The women and children are captured. These women and children have several fates. One is to be kept as individual booty by the capturing soldier. They may be taken north and sold. I've spoken to reporters who have seen encampments of black slave women in which Arab merchants approach them and offer them the so-called choice of selling one of their children, choosing which child to sell so that the others may live with the food he will give them in exchange. For 3 years, now Africa is not the only country where there is slavery. I write about slavery in other places around the world. Just 3 quick examples. If you had sugar in your coffee this morning, it might well have come from Haitians who are at gunpoint taken in the Dominican Republic and forced to cut sugar. If you stepped on an oriental carpet today, it might well have been the work of a child slave in Asia. And of course, we all know about the sex slaves in Thailand and Asia and the Philippines. But there are 3 distinguishing characteristics that make this case of black slavery different than those. 1, those are not pure chattel slaves. Normally, they're not the wholly owned property of other people. 2, in every one of those cases, human rights groups have come to their aid. There are campaigns for them. In this case, no one has come, aside from us, to the aid of the blacks. And thirdly, the media has taken up and done documentaries on those cases of slavery, and with maybe one exception that I know of, the media has ignored. It's almost been a media taboo. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jacobs. Now we will turn to Mohammed Nasir Atiye. Mr. Atiye is an African Muslim and a political refugee living in the United States. He's a former consular official of the Mauritanian government, and he now heads the International Coalition Against Chattel Slavery. Mr. Atiye.
Thank you very much. In his introductory remark in Anti-Slavery Society, John Mercer wrote in 1982, and I quote, "The head of state from 1960 to 1978, Mokhtar Ould Daddah, kept slaves behind his presidential palace. Slavery has been abolished 3 times since the independence. Before, we had the French who abolished slavery in Mauritania in 1920, and in 1960, slavery has been abolished again, and in 1980, the government of Mauritania has to come back again and abolish slavery again. We don't understand that. What does that mean? It means that slavery is deeply rooted in the Mauritanian society. And there are a lot of crimes that are going on in this Muslim Arab society today in Africa. And I'm glad to be here as a Muslim to testify before you that slavery has not ended in my country, but is well alive. Africa Watch, in a book that is written in 1994, just said that 10 years after the abolition of slavery in Mauritania, slavery was still there. The book has been published in 1994. So it's just 2 years ago. What to do about a country that is violating the international law? A country that is violating international law is illegal, actually. Basically, because they are doing things that are totally against the international law, and they are killing people, they are enslaving them, denying them their freedom, their justice, the justice they need to have as basic human rights. I would like also to add that Rakia Umar, who was head of Africa Watch, said in a paper published in 1990, the paper is called Forgotten Slaves. She said, nothing else could explain why, 10 years after the last emancipation, slavery of blacks in Mauritania remains a pernicious reality. Why is always black that are being kept slaves in Mauritania? And this is a problem that, as Jacob said, that is not only in Mauritania or Sudan, it's a reality that we can see in many of the Arab countries. Black are being kept slaves in those countries. And this is something that the international community should deal with. We cannot just say, yes, we are against war, where we are against civil war, and just forget about these people who are being denied their basic human rights. And I think this is just unfair. And we think as long as slavery is kept in those countries, there is no peace. We cannot talk about freedom. We cannot talk about democracy. Because there are some people who are being kept into bondage. And that's the reality I would like to talk about. And to finish, I just have here a paper also that is testifying about the selling of a young girl named Fatimetu just in 1994. This girl has been sold to a rich Saudi businessman. And that's explained in some ways that the slave trade is still going on. It's just not happening in Mauritania, but there is some commerce of slaves between Mauritania and some other countries. So I just want you to be aware of that, and I hope that Howard University will get in board and really help for the emancipation of slaves, not only in Mauritania and Sudan, but also all around the world. We have here an abolitionist movement, and this movement is determined to do whatever is necessary to end slavery. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move to Dr. Samuel Cotton. Mr. Cotton is a journalist and executive director of the Committed Against Slavery in Mauritania and Sudan, COSMUS. Mr. Cotton has just returned from Mauritania with a film of slaves serving their masters. Mr. Cotton.
Yes, good evening or good morning. My name is Samuel Cotton. I'll come right to the point on this. I'm a PhD candidate at Columbia University. I'm a contributing writer to 2 New York City newspapers, the City Sun and the Daily Challenge. I conducted from December 23rd, 1995 to January 17th, 1996, ethnographic research in the countries of Mauritania and Senegal. Now, I began in Senegal following the path of secondary research which was conducted by Human Rights Watch, Africa Watch, and a number of human rights organizations to interview refugees who had been thrown out of that country in an ethnic cleansing program based on race by the country of Mauritania. My decision to interview them revealed this information, that one, that of all the refugee camps, and I visited 4 refugee camps, the consensus in those refugee camps is that slavery continues to exist not in the same form that it did approximately a decade or so ago, but in a covert manner. But it is still flagrant, it is still massive. That is the consensus of the refugees on the other side of the Senegal River. There was also research which was done by Dr. or Professor Garbou Diallo, who is a Mauritanian scholar, and that is that Mauritanian Moors bring their slaves across the Senegal River with them to work in their businesses and in their homes. This was verified by me because I located one of those homes, filmed the individual in that home, interviewed them in Wolof with an assistant. The criteria that human rights organizations use to identify slaves in that culture are a black of Mauritanian origin living with a Moor, he works for free, and he has restriction to the rest of the community. This criteria was met, and this substantiates the anecdotal information that came from a number of other individuals in Senegal that there are black slaves in the businesses and homes of Mauritanians. Now, with that particular data, I crossed over on January 2nd into Mauritania, spent 10 days conducting further research. Interviewed the leaders of the two anti-slavery organizations, both Haratines, which would be identified as individuals who are free slaves. They are functioning in the pattern of Frederick Douglass in the terms that they were former slaves who had run away, received education by various means, and have now put their lives on the line to lead slaves and free slaves into a more equitable arrangement with their country. With them, I also interviewed in Underground Railroad type arrangements that are familiar with us with our customs of runaway slaves hiding from their masters. Interesting ethnographic pattern is that there are a number of these women who run away, and they run away leaving their babies. The masters hold the children and allow them to go. Starvation and a lack of governmental support and activities cause these people to soon begin to drift. Slave masters know where they are, such as in major cities like Nokchuk, and they show up and take the slaves back into bondage. And that's why human rights organizations give you very strange designations of part-time slaves, full-time slaves, and slaves. This country has been at the business of presenting cosmetic appearances of slavery ending for the past century. 1905, 1961, 1981. The problem that exists right now is that the State Department's information on this is that only the vestiges remain. This is a scientifically ridiculous statement. There are no studies done by accredited organizations like the London Anti-Slavery Group to verify any interviews, any census counts, any literature, any material gathered from slaves indicating that this is over. The vestiges of slavery, this is full-blown, covert, and intelligent moral virus that operates in that country in full blast. It is there. Any litmus test that one wants to place on it would have to be in the character of the activities that took place after the Emancipation Proclamation, after Congress argued 2 years in this country for a Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau was a concrete way of approaching the aspect of slavery so that individuals would not be recaptured, would not drift because of economical reasons back into slavery, and even the concrete measures of the Freedmen's Bureau of 1863 failed because of proper funding. So, without a concrete, measurable interventions supervised by international auspices, this virus of slavery, this cultural apparition of blacks being the chattel property of Arabs will continue along the belt. In 1994 State Department report that Tuaregs travel with their slaves across from Mali after contact and battle contacts with the Gondokoi and the Bella people who are resisting the past of slavery. UN observers state that 10% of the 80,000 people who traveled across were slaves. That's 8,000 slaves were in those camps as of 1994. Slavery is a fact in these countries. As to whether African American communities in the United States and the international community will do anything is the question. But it is verified by many scholars. Primary and secondary research is abundant. Now it is a moral question as to whether or not this is an accepted fact to enchain, enslave, and breed a man and woman, or whether because of the color of these individuals and the power and fear that is generated in the world today because of this threat will continue, will be the impetus or the force to keep the most heinous violation of human rights, that is to buy and sell and breed a human being, as to whether or not this will continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Dr. Augustine A. Lotto, who's Assistant Professor, the Department of Management and Labor Relations at Cleveland State University. He's also the chairman of the Coalition Against Slavery in Mauritania and Sudan, which is referred to as COSMOS, and president of Pax Sudani. And he was also born originally in Sudan and educated in the Sudan and in the United States. Dr. Lotto.
Thank you very much for that introduction. In fact, it takes some time away, from me having to introduce myself, and that is good. What we hope that we will have achieved in this gathering, to begin with, is that to not only come here and state and probably even assert to you that slavery exists in these countries, in Mauritania and Sudan. I think by now it only takes a short walk brief walk to the library, the public libraries, to a postage stamp, to get information from the UN, from the credible human rights organizations, to provide you ample evidence, even if you choose to disregard what we have to say, that indeed slavery does exist in this country, in these two countries. However, I must also state upfront that it has, for the emerging abolitionist movement, really been a very, very difficult challenge for us to try to get into the mindset of constituents in this part of the world that to believe that slavery does exist, and I hope that we will have moved beyond that. Also, the Sudanese and Mauritanians have actually been filtering into this country, and especially for the Sudanese, the largest number really can be traced to the periods between 1990 and now. And you'd actually ask why is that so? And it is precisely because these people have been outcast from their, they've been kicked out from their country. And I could also talk to my in my own behalf that I was born in Sudan, but in the first civil war we had to move to to Uganda. I took refuge in Uganda, and now I'm a refugee in this country for the very same situation that exists today. Now, to get right to the issue of slavery in Sudan, I think it is important to emphasize the fact that what exists in the Sudan are both the chattel slavery in the sense of buying and selling, owning and brutalizing of fellow human beings by other human beings. The chattel form of slavery does exist, and it is raging. The other form of slavery that also does exist is the institutionalized form of slavery. And it's important to emphasize this point because the institutionalized form of slavery, calls into question, the role of the government, in fostering, this heinous system in the country. And it is also important to recognize that the institutional context provides, the medium, the environment for the chattel slavery and other forms of oppression to occur. And a very important element of the role of the institution, the role of the government is what my friend Charles Jacobs had already indicated, the fact that jihad has been declared in the country as we speak. In fact, it has been flourishing for quite a while, and the declaration of jihad has to do with the targeting of a particular group who do not happen to, who happen not to believe in, in the government or in the ruling groups, religious, cultural, and racial, ideologies, and they are being targeted for, for a cultural, what has recently been referred to as cultural genocide. The other dimension of the institutionalized form of slavery is that all forms of the superstructure have actually provided either covertly in terms of tacit condonation of the slavery in the various successive regimes in the past, or in the current regime, overt participation in the system of enslavement. And the current government is overtly participating in the system, we believe, and we have every reason to do that. I mean, coming from Sudan and all the information we get, is that the government supplies arms, the government has created various militia groups, and all that, firepower and economics is supplied by the government for the ordinary Arab citizens in the country to go ahead and burn and loot African villages, capture women, capture children, and sell them into slavery. And the government also encourages a policy of forced Islamization and forced Arabization. And these terms basically refer to the intent, the concerted effort on the part of the government to convert non-Muslims, who are the majority of whom are in the Nuba Mountains and in the southern parts of the country, into Muslim. And not only is that enough, the government also tries to encourage a policy of converting these very blacks, these very Africans, to become Arab. And I will leave the details of the individual cases and acts of enslavement to to the eyewitness accounts. But I would like to set this whole context so that we are we are in a clear understanding of what is going on in the Sudan. And then to move right, because I have only probably 2 minutes left, to move right to what needs to be done. What needs to be done is that the world should really rise to its moral conscience, and that moral conscience has got to start right in this hall. I would hope that you don't actually leave this meeting with the impression that it's an interesting issue, but we've had interesting issues before, and that you'll have moved out and gone out with a zeal to try to combat this heinous system. The second point is that it is very befitting that we are talking here at Howard University that the leadership has to really start in the African American community. We cannot fight, Africans cannot fight the enslavement in the continent alone. They need their fellow kith and kin in the diaspora. But the fight need not only be left to to all Africans, whether in the continent or in the diaspora. This is an issue that affects everybody. It demeans modern civilization, and it requires the participation of everybody. Those in the media need to take up the issue and consistently and in concerted ways, focus on the issue so as to bring an action to put an end to this heinous system. I'll end there and wait for questions.
All right, thank you very much. Let us move on to Dr. Kevin Vigilante. Dr. Vigilante is a medical doctor practicing at Brown University's Miriam Hospital. He has traveled extensively to the Sudan, where he has secretly filmed slave encampments and interviewed former slaves. Dr. Vigilante.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. I'll briefly recount my experience in the Sudan about 12 months ago. I went to the Sudan with several objectives. One was to evaluate medical conditions there in certain situations. Two, to investigate reports of slavery. And three, to investigate reports of the mass abduction and forced incarceration of black African children. I traveled there and took with me a very small, square video camera. It almost looked like a 35 millimeter. And you're not supposed to take pictures in the Sudan without a special photographic permit. And so I used this video camera somewhat surreptitiously to interview children who had escaped from slavery, parents who had children who escaped, and other people who were knowledgeable on this subject, including members of international NGOs living there, clergy, and I even spoke to some members of the government, but of course did not video them. I learned that there are basically three types of slavery extant in the Sudan. The first type grows out of a centuries-old tradition of slavery coming out of intertribal warfare. Most recently, however, particularly in the 80s, the government chose to arm Arab tribes in their wars against the black African tribes, particularly the Dinka. And in this particular case, they were arming the Bagara tribe. And they encouraged this conflict and also encouraged there was no reprisal for the booties of war, including the capture and enslavement of children from the Dinka tribe, which happened in very, very large numbers. The Bagara so armed were called the Murahalin, and there is a network of slavery that comes out of this particular methodology. There's a second mode of slavery that comes more directly from government forces, particularly the Popular Defense Force. The Popular Defense Force is a sort of a non-professional, irregular army that's ideologically based. They are the warriors in the jihad. The warriors are called the Mujahideen as opposed to Murahalin. They are engaged in the jihad, the war in the south, and the Mujahideen of the PDF are generally paid poorly or not at all. And they are permitted, if not encouraged, to keep the spoils of war as part of their compensation. And the spoils of war may indeed include other human beings, particularly children. One illustrative case, there's a train, a supply train that goes from Baba Nusa to Wau. Wau is a city deep in the south. It's a supply train. And this train goes very, very slowly, a couple of miles a day, really. And hordes of PDF soldiers will be on either side of the train in horseback, ostensibly to protect the train. However, what actually happens is the PDF soldiers fan out into the countryside, raid villages, keep cattle and children, load them on the train, and when the train gets to Wau, they have their booty. And these children are then may often go back to the families of these warriors who may be living in the north. And I spoke to a number of children who escaped from such capture. The third is a type of slavery that I think it's a legitimate form of slavery. It involves the mass abduction of children in the streets. In the streets of Khartoum, of course, there are many displaced kids, homeless kids, but there are also kids who have parents, and like your children. These children may be rounded up en masse in raids called kashas. A kasha is a raid. And typically a truck with a canvas covering on it will pull up into a street or a city square, and soldiers will come out and round up whatever children are there. And I spoke to some children who were so rounded up, and some had just been going out to buy tomatoes for their mother or whatever, shopping in the market, and were taken away. These kids are then taken to camps, that many of which are in very remote areas, way out in the desert, not near anything at all. And a typical story there is that a child will be given a new name, stripped of his old name, basically a new identity, and then undergo forced Islamization, and be given a new cultural identity, really. They're really, in a sense, cultural cleansing camps to strip these kids of their identities. Now, the real concern, I mean, this is, as if this isn't bad enough, because these kids will never see their parents again except in some extraordinary circumstances. There are real concerns that these kids are being then used as cannon fodder, you know, to be sent to the war in the South to fight in the front on the battle, because there is a tremendous need for manpower in that war. El-Bashir has committed himself to a 1-million-man army. Do these kids go to the South? There are multiple reports of this. I think that requires further substantiation. I managed to visit such a camp. My last day in the Sudan, after really not getting anywhere with government agencies and officials, I had approximate coordinates of a camp in Wad Medani, near Wad Medani, way out in about 400 kilometers out in the desert. And I rented a car and a driver, and we drove out there, and sort of by luck found this camp in the middle of nowhere, huts without any sort of facilities at all, and it was empty. But 2 armed guards came out to meet us, and after a while gained their confidence and spoke to them. They're wearing army uniforms, and they corroborated the story that there were indeed 228 kids there up until September 9th. Before that, when these kids were moved away. Where these kids went, I don't know. They didn't know. Of course, the greatest concern is that they might have been sent to the front. I mean, but that's unknown. They disappeared. So I think that, and I think this qualifies for a form of slavery. I mean, the kids are being abducted and forced into an environment that's against their will, and they'll never see their parents again, and given new identities, and maybe being shipped off to war. This is a very grave situation. That's what I saw. Now, just a word about the response that you will hear. You will hear the response that, well, because these kids typically are black African Southerners. And you'll hear people say from the Sudan, particularly the Northerners, say, well, listen, we're all black. Look at our skins. We're dark. See, I'm darker than you. And that's true. In fact, the Sudan is remarkable for its racial heterogeneity. The Nile River produces a tremendous mixing of genes, and so you'll find an imperceptible gradation of color from light skin to dark throughout the Sudan. However, I must say that there is also a hierarchy of class and culture based on skin and tribal tones of skin color and tribal associations. And you know, I'm at the extremes. It's very clear into which camp somebody falls. You know, I'm a white guy from Rhode Island, and I wasn't there very long before I could easily pick out, you know, a Dinka or a Shilluk or a Nuer, as opposed to somebody from the South. So these, if such differentiations were transparent to me, it's easy to see how they'd be transparent to other people there and used as a method of discrimination and enslavement. Sudan is a tragic place. It's been at war for most of this century in one way or the other. But I must say it's made even more tragic because the Sudanese are among, it's really paradoxical. They're among the most gentle and accommodating people that I've met in many travels. So I just hope that someday the Sudan will find its way to freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Sheikh Anwar Makeen, who is described as a Muslim spiritual and political leader of the Nubian people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to listen to our story. It pains me to talk about it, but since it is a reality, it has to be aired out. It is a fact that in my country, there is an inhuman practice of individuals owning other individuals from their own country under the same law, but treat them as subservients and as slaves. In Sudan, we have a word, brotherhood. Everybody in Sudan call it, everybody a brother. But this word means nothing to some people. To some people, it's just a deceit or hypocrisy. I have lived this situation for generations, since the invasion of the Arabs in 1317, when they were chased out from Egypt by the Mamluk rulers, when they overthrew the Fatimites, and they had no choice but to invade Sudan and continue the domination of the indigenous people until today. We had been oppressed, driven out from our land in the north on the Nile to remote mountainous areas where we had no life there, but hid ourselves in caves like any other animal. And we have been treated as slaves from that time. The situation in the country is a very complicated one, because when you go to Khartoum, you found that those people who have the appetite to call the indigenous people slaves, they are not white people, they are not light-skinned people, they are as black as myself. But the problem is that they had been Arabized and Islamized since the invasion. Now they identify themselves with the Arabs, even though the Arabs in their own lands don't accept them. And we tell them, why don't you put down this kind of attitude and let us build this country? But yet, it is a culture to them. It is a life to them. You take it from them, they are nobody. If you take the slave, if they don't have people to serve them, they don't feel good. So the problem is not that when we talk about slavery, this is not going to stop it. Charles Gordon in 1870, in January 1870, he stopped it when he was appointed governor of Khartoum. He patrolled the areas so that the slave trades would not go on, but the Jalaba, the trade merchants, moved to the big cities and still continue to raid and go sneak into the areas and abduct children and young girls and slave them. And it is still continuing to today. In 1965, in El Obeid, in the town of El Obeid, a slave ran from their master, from a Nubian people, and he was tortured, burned in between his legs into his genitals, and he ran and he came to me. That time I was the president of the gun movement, General Union of Nuba. So he came to me, and I demonstrated. We went out, and I was put in jail. In 1985, Sadiq al-Mahdi armed the Arab militia in Kordofan to raid the Nubians, and they did. And the enslavement continued there under by force. So it is the government that is involved in enslaving other people. What we want to do is not only to talk about slavery in Sudan, because they will not stop it. What we need is to liberate people, the indigenous people in the country. Whenever we try to take over the government, they called us we are racists. I organized a coup d'etat in 1969, and I was put in jail for 1 year. And I was labeled as a racist against the Arabs, while I have my birthright to rule my country. Nobody will ever deny me to rule my country unless that person is a colonizer. If he can come organize a coup d'etat and take over the government, why shouldn't I? Who could deny me that right? So we are fighting. And we are telling these people that we want to take part in the government so that we may be decision makers. This is what is going to stop the slavery when we are decision makers in the government. They wouldn't allow us. So we are going to fight by force. Where the Arabs came into the country, whom we call them the Arabized, because they are not real Arabs. If they don't accept to be called indigenous people of the country, because we don't know where they would go. And they know where they don't have any other place to go. The Arabs will not accept them. We are always asking them to come to a compromise how we can rule the country together. But their persistence of looking upon us and treating us as slaves has given us the courage to fight, and we are going to fight. I'm glad that you are listening to the story, and I wish an action can be taken to support the indigenous people in the country. By all means. We're not saying the African Americans, because this is inhuman. So since this is inhuman, it involves all human beings all over the world. These practices, yes, it might have had justification some time ago when it was a commerce. But today it has become an inhuman practice. Somebody to own another human being and to treat another human being like a slave. So I will leave other details if any questions come up. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I think we'd like to throw the session open for questions. I'm sure there are other points of view represented in our audience, and we would hope that people who have different views will express those views. Would anyone like to start? Okay, please.
All of you have mentioned the prevalence of slavery, but there have been very few actual numbers thrown around. Can anybody give an estimate, or is there, has the UN recently come up with any estimate for how many, what's the gross number we're talking here about people out of the population of the country?
John Mercier, who is working for Anti-Slavery International, said that there is in Mauritania 100,000 slaves. And he said there are 300,000 part-time slaves in Mauritania at this present time. And also the State Department, in its report in 1991, 1992, and I think 1993, has been talking about a conservative number that is 19,000 slaves. 90,000 slaves in Mauritania. But as a Mauritanian who has traveled extensively in Mauritania, I can tell you that that number is quite low to me. I have traveled east, west, and south, and I think the number is close to 40% of the population in Mauritania, which is only about 2 million people. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Please.
Okay. All of the panelists mentioned, or I heard a few of the panelists actually mentioned that they would like African Americans to play a role in the fight against slavery in the Sudan. But recently, in his trip abroad, Louis Farrakhan, who was emerged as an African American leader, it is my understanding, made the comment that slavery did not exist or that it was at a minimal level in the Sudan. Now, the majority or the masses of African Americans don't really have a knowledge of slavery in Mauritania and the Sudan. I know I'm a college student, and it was definitely a surprise to me. So what would be the effect, or how could we combat such a comment by such a leader with, you know, such a high standing among African American people?
I think it's important, especially as a student, that you and others develop critical thinking. A critical thinking that can operate in the atmosphere that's been generated by years of oppression in this country. In other words, we have a lot of pain from a lot of the things we've gone through, and so at times we don't critically think or examine our leaders and what they say. Now, if you were to take Mr. Louis Farrakhan's statement that slavery doesn't exist in Mauritania or exists only at minimal levels in the Sudan, that would fly in the face of what we know of knowledge in the world. The sources, Human Rights Watch. The sources, the United Nations, Gaspar Biro's work. Africa Watch. Shams Biataya's work out of London. The sources are enormous that support this. In fact, they're all at critical mass. However, the statement that there is no slavery, or that even the morally reprehensible statement that it's at acceptable or minimal levels, so we wouldn't respond to it, are statements that have no basis in scientific literature, in research literature, and so if they're accepted, they would be accepted on a political basis. If they're said politically. They have no basis in what the world knows. If you move outside the African American community, there are no journalists, scientists, researchers, human rights organizations, non-governmental organizations that say that there's no slavery. So this statement is only able to grow and function in the environment of the African American community because of its desire for unity at this time and its desire never to attack its own leaders. Outside in the real world, everyone knows this is a fact and has been a fact almost from the beginning of time.
Can I follow up?
All right. We'll follow here, please.
Well, I wanted to respond to the call for African American, community to participate more vigorously on the issue. I think, as students, and more specifically to you and other people in the room, well, I think the most important thing is you don't have to take the issue, the fact that slavery exists in Mauritania and Sudan from leaders or from individuals. Your first task would be to do an independent, research. The library sources are abundantly available. Now, the next thing is to garner resources for the organizations, African American organizations, to personally make a trip, a fact-finding, a research trip, an ethnographic research trip, such as what Sam Cotton did, in those places where slavery is alleged to exist. And a number of organizations have, even though things are very hard, the country, Sudan has actually sealed off, certain areas, particularly the Nuba Mountains and so forth. It is still possible to travel into these areas via Nairobi and through the SPLA control, the areas controlled by the liberation forces in the south. So do your own work and you will come to the conclusion that slavery does exist. And as I had said before, we really hope that we will have moved, from contesting slavery. In fact, I was very distressed, by the other comment of Minister Farrakhan that the people in the South are very, very, and I believe it was repeated 14 times or so, black, and the people in the North are, light skin, different, like him. That is really a kind of a message that, to us who are already, facing this heavy burden of, of enslavement, is a continued justification, that these people are really nobody and they are therefore enslavable. And I think it's important for you to do an independent research, independent work, and work with the abolitionist groups that have emerged in this country. And you will be convinced that there is a cause to fight for.
Yeah. It is becoming known that while we have been blessed by, this movement has been blessed by the black Catholic Bishop of Sudan, we've been blessed by the Muslim sheikhs in Sudan, we have been criticized by Mr. Farrakhan. You should know that we never had him in mind when we went to liberate the slaves, but there's an interesting story that you should know about what happened in New York. Minister Farrakhan has tours to Khartoum, and on those tours he takes black journalists, and those black journalists would come back to New York, Chicago, Detroit, and their communities and write that stories of human rights abuses and slavery are not real, they're Western CIA, FBI, Zionist tricks and plots. The last time these fellows came back to New York, they had a very difficult time with the abolitionist movement, which had sprung up under people like Sam Cotton, a man named William Pleasant, etc. And there was a debate in Harlem at the, I think it's an historic debate, at the Harriet Tubman Hall. And when the Nation of Islam supporters said that this was nothing more than a Jewish Zionist plot, they had to debate people like the people on this panel and Simon Dang, and they were booed off the stage for that. Later, the controversy spread to the WLIB, the black radio, where Sam Cotton and Sheikh McKean then debated the spokesman of the Nation of Islam on PBS's Tony Brown show. When Tony Brown showed Akbar Muhammad, who was the spokesman, film of black children in chains, I mean, we have this film, being beaten to learn the Quran, Akbar Muhammad of the Nation of Islam said, and I quote, "Well, that's their culture, they'll beat them." We think that the Nation of Islam itself got a problem with this. We never meant to look at them. They have criticized us. I think they may be reconsidering their position soon. By the way, he did not say on his, in his talk in Chicago that there were no slaves. He said the following. He said, it has been written about him that he condones slavery. Now, how could he ever do that? So he went to speak to John Garang, who was the leader of the Southern Resistance. And in a 3-hour talk with John Garang said nothing about slavery, according to Mr. Farrakhan. Now, Mr. Farrakhan did not say that he asked John Garang if there was slavery. And perhaps John Garang was talking about the genocide of his people and didn't get to mention that. But Augustin Lotto will tell you what John Garang has to say about that. And finally, he did say, to explain to black America what the war is in Sudan, he said, the Arab North is fighting the black, mostly Christian South, and the people in the South are black, 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 and the people in the North are like you and me. And I think that's, that was an unfortunate statement. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to add something to what Mr. Farrakhan said about this. And I think it's very unfortunate because he is a moral leader and he is leading an organization that is a religious organization, but also so-called a civil rights organization. At some time before the Million Man March, we sent him a fax asking him to help us come to the podium and speak about slavery because we thought the million-man people there had the right to know about slavery. He just refused to even answer to our request to come and speak to the Million-Man March. Now he's going to Sudan saying that there is no slavery. Did he really go to the places where we have slavery in Sudan? And probably when he goes to Mauritania, he's going to say, there is no slavery there also. Let me tell you this. You don't need to investigate about slavery in Mauritania. You smell it. It's right there. When Samuel Carton went to Mauritania, he did not have, even right from Dakar, he got all the information he needed for documenting about slavery in Mauritania. When he went inside Mauritania, it was overwhelming. The situation is, in my view, that he is recruiting Muslims in his nation of Islam. He's trying to show that in the Muslim society, everything is fine. It's everything brotherhood. Everything is wonderful. That's not true. I'm telling you this. In my country, you have 99% Muslim. But we have Muslim killing Muslim, raping Muslim, torturing them. And this is the situation that is being hidden here in this country because you want everybody to be a Muslim. I'm a Muslim. I'm proud to be a Muslim. But we have to face one true reality today, that in Muslim societies, blacks are being enslaved, tortured. There are women who are Muslim, and sometimes in Sudan who are animists, are being raped. How can a Muslim can do that? To me, it's just unacceptable. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes. This is the Hilltop Reporter, Howard University newspaper.
Thank you. I'm from Sudan, and I left Sudan in 1982. And when I left, I never heard of slavery taking place. This issue, of course, concerned me as a human being, as a Muslim, and a Sudanese. And I agree with Mr. McCain about making it an all-Sudanese discussion. But the singling out of, the northern Sudanese being, starting this slavery thing, to me is a little misleading because if it exists, then there is some cooperation from the people who are enslaved themselves. Like even in the old time, during the early time of the slavery in the 1700s, the slaves were not simply captured by the Europeans. They were made slave by the cooperation of the slave themselves. The same thing in Sudan. It's not only the northern Sudanese. I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just trying to be objective. That when you say northern Sudanese are doing slavery in Sudan, well, I have yet to be convinced that it really exists today, and people buy people for money and for other material things. But also you have to remember that the discussion should be also focused on those who participate, whether they're from the north or from the south, whether they're black or they're white or light skinned. In Sudan, it should be a Sudanese issue, and as I say, this is a great discussion, but I have a hard time, believing that in 1996 people pay money to buy other human beings.
I can read you a couple of case reports. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, brother. I'm glad that you're from Sudan and you understand the situation very well. I can testify and tell you that I've been to homes in Khartoum and Umdowan Ban and Debeba, where I found slaves in their masters' homes. This, I know them, I talk to them, we ate together. I say, and then I ask them, how long have you been? They say, we were born here. Our fathers were slaves, and we are still for this, as slaves for our masters, their children. So it exists. There's no doubt about it, because I have no point to say a Sudanese enslaves another Sudanese. If I have not seen it myself, and I have not talked to the Sudanese, a Sudanese slave to a Sudanese. As I said, some time ago, slavery was a kind of trade. And business can decline, can flourish, and it may end. But when it goes on, it is no more business or trade. It has become a system. And this is what we want to stop it. This is one. The Arabized people, because I don't refer to them as Arabs, especially in our charter of our party, I'm a leader of a party, Zunjira party, we say there are no Arabs in the country. The people who see they are Arabized, but they are no Arabs. Their identity is Sudan. They have no other place to go. But these people, whom we consider as they're our people, they still have that in their mind, that they feel good to own somebody to serve them. This, we want to stop this. We are all human beings. We have to introduce a new understanding that people could serve themselves, not to be waiting on people to serve them. This is what is going on in Sudan. And they only use the black and the indigenous people for those services. Religiously, you go to the Mahdi house, you find people bowing down to the children of Mahdi and calling them master. Those people who are working there, they work for nothing. They are fed, they are given a place to sleep in, they are clothed, they have no salaries, they have no their account of their own. Their families are fed by the Mahdi because they are slaves. But they are promised, deceived religiously, that if they obey their master, they're going to have a part in the paradise. You go to El Mergan in Khartoum North, you find the same thing. We want to stop this kind of thing. If you, Sudanese, if I know some of people in my party, the Sudanese, are from the north, from the east, from all parts, and we are very angry against other people, other Sudanese enslaving other people. They are from the Shamal, I'm from the north, and Nubian, we consider to be from the north. So we are not saying that every northerner owns slaves. There are people who have the appetite, who feel it. And I have been called myself as a slave. Repeatedly, I have heard this addressed to me. You slave. Because I'm just black. There's no reason. Moreover, before the independence, those who are Arabized, who did not want to identify themselves as Sudanese, because a Sudanese means black and means a slave. They call themselves Awlad Balad. We know the language. Awlad Balad means the children of the land. They don't want to accept to be called Sudanese. That time I was in Umdurman, where we used to beat each other with those Awlad Balad. I have been beaten, and I have also beat some people, because I'm black and those are Awlad Balad. So when we meet, we fight. This is a fact that's going on. It needs a further study and research so that we can end this kind of practices.
Yeah, I'd like to, are you a student? Okay. Maybe think about a phenomenon. I'm going to respond to your disbelief. There's a phenomenon going on, and I'd just like to give it to you as a student. This has to do with the fact that people are being bought and sold, is the allegation. That people are, the slavery continues for black people in the world. Now, Anti-Slavery Society has a report that you could study. The Journal of Slavery and Abolition by Robin Collins' work is massive. There's testimony from the Subcommittee on Africa. Documents person, place, and time. Dr. John Eibner, Christian Solidarity International. Bishop Makram Max Gassis, Human Rights Watch, has 22 volumes on Sudan. Newsweek did a year-long study. Gaspard Bureau's work, The International Labor of Geneva, the London Observer's work, Amnesty International has volumes, the Committee on Retrieving Kidnapped Children, eyewitnesses, they're here today. Pictures of the slaves of Mauritania are in New York at SIPA's lab. It's full documentation. But an incredible phenomenon takes place in the African American community. All of this means nothing. Only a leader has to stand up and say, go home. It doesn't exist, I'm telling you. And despite our education, despite how we're taught to dig into our books, to do references, to do statistical studies, we train in anthropology, we know about ethnography. One leader stands up on this issue, which is central to our history. Every problem in a black community can be traced back to the effects of slavery. And only one leader has to say, it's not true, go home, all of you. Nothing's happening. Forget the Africans. Don't listen to what they say. It doesn't exist. You must examine this phenomenon. There's something psychosocial going on in these communities that the rest of the world has knowledge to the critical level of mass. Person, place, and time is never overturned in any discussion. Witnesses, pictures, photographs become irrelevant in our milieu. What's happening? What is this? Some people say, brother, that has to do with, we have so much pain about slavery, we flood, some social psychologists say, and we reject it. Analysts say, we're so hungry for unity in the black community, we can't afford to disbelieve the only leader who shows something. I ask you as a student, I'm not here to try and convince you. I've seen it myself. That's irrelevant. What do you do with this data? What do you do with these people? What do you do with that history? If you walk away from it, at least you must ask yourself, how, as a student, as a scholar, as a human being, do I walk away from it and say, I dismiss it based on a prominent black leader who has risen in a vacuum at our time? This question I set to you, and this task I set for you, once you solve that task, you will either join this or please come to my home in New York and release me from this.
Okay. Dr. Vellante, would you like to?
Well, I was just going to make one or two comments. I interviewed a number of people when I was there, and I interviewed Edward and his father, and this is their statement. Edward F., just using initials, 10 years old, and is from Kalakala. In November of 1994, Edward was at the market near his home when he was swept up in Akasha, that roundup that I previously described. He was taken to a camp far from his house where he describes very harsh treatment. Said he was only allowed to sleep for a few hours every night, was frequently hungry, was fed with only beans and lentils. He said there were many children there from the south, and the children were severely beaten if they tried to escape. A guard who worked in the camp and who was also from the boy's neighborhood recognized the boy and got word to his father that the boy was there. It took his father some months to get there, get the appropriate money for bribes to get the kid out of the camp. The father was actually questioned quite harshly in the process of retrieving the child in an attempt to discover how he found out about the camp and how he knew his child was there. I spoke to them, but they refused to have a picture taken. I did interview another boy who I do have on video, which there was no facility to do the video here today, who described how he was captured and traded from one family member to another, was forced to watch cattle, was in that family but couldn't eat with them, was kept separate, called a slave, and he showed how they would cut the Achilles tendon of black kids who were enslaved there and tried to escape. Another boy I spoke to, who I do also have on tape, was also rounded up in a marketplace, and he was taken to a camp, and he says that he was on the list to go off to war, to fight, but that a military officer there thought he was too young and too small and interceded in his behalf, and so was taken off that, was saved from that fate, and then he subsequently escaped, and I have his story on this videotape. So there are, despite the disbelief that we all bring to this issue, I think there are, my impression coming away from it, that there are in fact documentable cases.
Well, I think we are about, I don't know what Mr. is going to decide, but we are about maybe to leave now. If ever you decide to have more information about this, please let us know. We have all the documentation for you ready. Thank you.
Okay, we have other questions. Yes, please.
Dr. Ko, I'd like to say thank you very much for this kind of forum. I think it's more informative for some of us to come here and listen to people rather than just read materials. I'm a Liberian citizen, myself a refugee, as a result of man feeding better than another man, perhaps not a slave. I think one of the most important things we have to note here is to inform other people outside of the walls that we sit in. This will somehow help some of the burden or get rid of some of the ignorance about what is really going on. Like a college student here asking this kind of question, a brother from Sudan asking this kind of question, I think it's more, surprising. And I would like to know why we don't have any some of these medias present here today. Like maybe, those who can see, those who can show, those who can hear, and those who can talk. Did you invite anybody like this here? And why are they not here this time?
The media is very well represented today. Most and more of our events, the Washington Post, the Dateline Television is here, so there are many people from the media here. 60 Minutes is here. So they're quite a representative group, which I'm very pleased with, because most of the times, most of our events sponsored here at Harvard, we don't get covered by the press. So this is one event that is being covered, and the Hilltop is here also. I'll go to another student, if I might, please.
Yeah, thank you. My question goes to the last panelist. I have a little worry about democracy in Africa that we're promoting now, and the movement of gaining back, or your group being included in the democratic process, or not the democratic process, I would say, in the political process in Sudan. I very much would like to see that happen. My question to you would be, since you said you're going to use any means necessary, meaning you can fight by force, once you get into the process, how would you work it for you to be able to reach out to the other groups in terms of building up a solid democracy in Sudan?
We have tried means of participating in the government, but we didn't have chance, even though we have parties to fight democratically, and we are sure if democracy is well established in the country, we will win the rule in the country, because we are the majority. The Arab trends are a minority in the country. And the emergence of this new concept of Zinjarab, who has won all those Arabis, we have re-brainwashed them so that they can identify themselves as Sudanese. And we are growing very fast. But since there's no democracy, and now the war is going on to eradicate the indigenous people. I have a paper here by Human Rights which says Sudan eradicating the Nuba. And not only the Nuba, the indigenous people in the country. Because in the Arab perspective, using the Arabized people in the country, even though the Arabized people in the country are not aware of that the Arabs are looking for food supply land, and Sudan is chosen. In 1955, they sent an Egyptian official in the army, Soq Salah Salim, to go and investigate the South before the mutiny of the South. Investigation was to find the land for the Arabs. And then, when Azhari came to power, they told him, we want the land. And that's why Azhari, who was the first president, he sent to the Southern Command to transfer all the Southern troops to the north, so that he would replace them with the northern troops, to eradicate the indigenous people and to empty the land and give the land to the Arabs. This is a big story. There are a lot of things that have not been, has not have a chance to come out. But we will disclose every secret that has been inflicted on our people. There is no retreat anymore. By force, by democracy, we are going to take back our country and give them a decision. If they want to stay with us, we are not going to discriminate against them. If they don't want, if they say no, they still feel that they are not Sudanese, well, let them go where they want.
I would like to ask Dr. Ledo, he came last year to renew his passport, and he's holding Sudanese passport. I would like him to tell us, what happened in Sudan embassy when he came, and how we treat him, and what happened exactly in Sudan embassy.
Well, I don't know what the context of that question is. If the context is that whether I'm a Sudanese and I'm not I'm treated unwell, I mean, I think it was a matter of course that any Sudanese in a foreign land would ordinarily go to the embassy to renew their passport, and for every other every other function that makes his or her stay in the foreign land possible. And the absolute least that could be expected would be for the officials of the Sudan embassy to arrest me at the embassy, in which case of course they feared that this whole issue would blow up. So I mean, that whole thing is self-explanatory. I won't want to go to that. The other point, though, that I want to say is with respect to the issue of democracy. You cannot talk about participating in the democratic process when a large population of the country doesn't even have the right to his or her sense of humanity. So in some respect, this whole issue of slavery and the campaign, the abolitionist campaign, might in some respect be retrogressive, because nations and societies have moved to higher forms of governance. However, we cannot provide for a democratic process when the majority or in a number of the population is being enslaved. And it is really, it's not the issue of taking the matter from Lado, from Sheikh Makin, from members of this panel. What I'm saying is that this is an issue that that everybody has to be involved. You need to talk to various sources and corroborate things for yourself. And after doing that, join the abolitionist movement. So I hope to have addressed both concerns.
Brother asked the question how the embassy treats the Sudanese, even though if they are against the system in the country or they are with the system. The embassy is here to treat all equally, not to discriminate from people. It has nothing to do with the system in the country. But what happened in New York, where maybe you would not like to hear it, but the members of the Sudan mission to the United Nations, they tried to kill me. And it is documented. And the people who went to Brooklyn and had a meeting, and they plotted, they said, we will send, I know the names of the people whom they were about to send and silence me. So your embassy may have a different attitude, and the United mission to the United Nations has a different attitude. So we are not going to say the embassy or all the diplomatic representation of Sudan outside the Sudan. Each group may have their own discretion. But what I have experienced is that the Sudan mission to the United Nations, and if you want the names, you ask in the embassy here, I will come and give you the names of people who wanted to kill me. And I will, when I go back, I will send you what the report that the newspapers have written about them.
to get in one more question, if I might, and then we'll come back to you. Please.
I want to address the question which has been asked by the Sudanese, the first question, when he was asking that, talking about he never hear these things in the Sudan. For those who are not Sudanese, the facts is in the Sudan, no a single Sudanese will come up and admit that he is doing something wrong. For example, during the 17 Years' War, the Northerners, they don't call it is a war, 17 years. They call it period of incident. How can you keep incidents for 17 years? That is a culture of the denial in the Northern Sudanese. The issue of my fellow here from embassy, when he was asking about how they're treating Augustine in embassy, that's a ridiculous question. How are you treating the Sudanese in the country? Ask yourself a question first before you ask Augustine how you treat it in embassy. Of course, you have to treat him nice because this is not your land. Because if you don't treat him now, you will be questioned by the other people whom are adopted you to be in this country. The question to be asked, how are you treating people in Sudan, and in particular in Khartoum? Can you explain to the Orient what is the meaning of kasha? As somebody from the government, be honest, tell the people what is the meaning of kasha, and whom are the target to be taken away in the city. These are the Africans. They are not wanted. Take them to the desert. Come back again when the fellow was asking that about my brother, I will tell you the names and the peoples and the place where are my people being enslaved today. I will take you to Kosti, to Fashishoya, to Marabe, to Ilega. These are the places maybe you never gone to those places. And I will tell you whom are the people who brought them from up Nile and in which way. But the fact of the matter is, no a single Sudanese will admit that he is doing something wrong. Sadiq al-Mahdi himself, when he was confronted by the facts, he turned back and he said that it is true that the Denka capture the Arabs and the Arab capture the Denkas. My brother, do we capture the Arab to take them to where? Thank you.
At the founding meeting of the American Anti-Slavery Group, and which was the founding meeting of what is now called the Neo-Abolitionist Movement, our strategy was to reconvene the anti-apartheid movement. Up to this point, I can tell you that we haven't done so well. With few exceptions, the anti-apartheid coalition of black leaders, liberal journalists, women's groups, with few exceptions, like the Women's Independent Forum today, have been AWOL or are hiding under the bed, indeed. And if we had time, I could tell you name by name by name and organization by organization. We have been blocked. We've been blocked by the media, which treats this as a taboo. Everybody, every school child in America knows that Bosnian women are raped. Everybody in the world knows that the whales are having a hard time. Nobody knows, or practically nobody knows, that you can buy a black woman for $15 in parts of Africa. So we're on, we have been blocked, but we will not stop. We're on our way. We are going to Congress this afternoon, and we made a specific point to stop here at Howard University because we have, we're on a freedom train, and after what you've heard, we want you to be on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Dr. Coles, my question is for you. You said earlier that Howard University takes no stand on any of this. Given the sources that are mentioned here, how can you not?
Well, I'm not empowered to speak for Howard University. I'm an administrator at Howard University, and what I've sought to do by providing a forum is to present different points of view and different perspectives on the issue. And I think that's the role of a university. The role of a university is to open up the environment for learning, for discovery, for its students and for its faculty. And that's the way I look at what this is supposed to be. This is a forum, it's a symposium for discussion. It's not a position that Howard University needs to take a position. If you want Howard University to take a position, Howard University will take a position. The point is that Howard University is providing an environment for free discussion on issues of global interest. And we're doing this at our university because we feel it's important. If you want a position, we'll get you a position from the university, but I'm not empowered as an administrator running a center to state a Howard University position. I hope you will understand that academic freedom says that people have the right to express their own views to the world and to our student body, and that's what we're participating in. With that in mind, I'd like to bring to your attention, in the next hour we will have a forum on women's rights are human rights, and there are several noted women who will be coming here to Howard University at this center to talk about the problems of women's rights around the world. It's a sort of a follow-up to Beijing and to get into some of those issues. On the 19th of March, we will have the former Secretary of State coming here to speak. Lawrence Eagleburger will talk about U.S. foreign policy in the 21st century. We have Secretary Pelledru to come to talk about the Middle East on April 5. We will have a major dedication of this facility in honor of Ralph J. Bunche, who was an international civil servant, on April the 11th, and the featured speaker will be Boutros Ghali, and that will take place at 12 o'clock here at Howard University. On April 19th and April 20th, we will have a major conference on the Caribbean, talking about the Association of Caribbean States and moving to the common market and a study of that on the Caribbean area. On May the 2nd, there will be a major conference on issues affecting minorities in foreign policy, sponsored by the Council on Foreign Relations and the Ralph J. Bunche Center. So there are many activities that express many different points of views, and we welcome that learning environment. We welcome that diversity to our university. Thank you.